Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express. This was something that was revealed back in 2021, but since he's now running for president, it's really come out and people are focusing on it. So this Newsweek article came out just the other day. Exclusive. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express. It goes on to say he has clarified the nature of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after it was revealed that the presidential hopeful had flown on the convicted sex offender's private jet. The independent 2024 presidential candidate was among a number of high-profile people who, in 2021, were named as passengers on Epstein's jet, which was often used to transport guests to the financier's private Caribbean island, Little St. James. Epstein's luxury Boeing 727 was derisively referred to as the Lolita Express by a number of media outlets following allegations that it was used to fly underage girls to some of the multimillionaire's properties. Following Epstein's death in jail in 2019, which was ruled a suicide. I like how they put it, which was ruled a suicide rather than Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, because who believes that? Lists have been shared on social media purporting to show the public figures who had visited the island, which is located east of Puerto Rico in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're going to go into what Kennedy had to say. Kennedy said that he had flown one time on Jeffrey. Actually, it said that this was a spokesperson. I want to clarify this. A spokesperson for the former Democrat exclusively told Newsweek that he had flown one time on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane. It was in 1993 from New York City to Palm Beach, Florida to visit RFK Jr.'s mom for Easter. And the spokesperson added that the private jet trip was made possible by Kennedy's then wife, Mary Richardson Kennedy, who was friendly with Epstein's partner at the time, Ghislaine Maxwell. Richardson Kennedy passed away in 2012. She committed suicide. Kennedy has been married to Cheryl Hines since 2014. Said Mary Kennedy's wife, and two of their kids were on the flight. The representative said Mary knew Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who learned they were going to Palm Beach for Easter, and they offered their family a ride. So that's the story coming from the spokesperson. I want to tell you some of the names that were listed in 2021 that had ridden on the Lolita Express. That would be Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., violinist Itzhak Perlman, U.S. Senator John Glenn, and former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was asked about this because this came out in 2021, this list, and Whitney Webb, who's been hot on the trail of what's been going on, everything Epstein, she wrote a book, One Nation Under Blackmail, her volume 2, and she talked to RFK Jr. about this, and he actually said he had ridden on the plane twice to Whitney Webb. He said that on 2 occasions he was on Epstein's plane that had been arranged between Ghislaine Maxwell and Mary Richardson. In one instance, the flight was part of a pre-planned fossil hunting trip to South Dakota, which he believed had been Ghislaine's idea, as Epstein had appeared to only have attended grudgingly. And then he also said that the other flight was the return trip to New York from South Dakota. The other flight was the one to from New York to Palm Beach in order to visit Ethel Kennedy, his mother. And he said that he and Mary were accompanied by Kennedy's 2 older children on each flight. So both times the kids were there on the flight. Whitney Webb actually brought this up because the Newsweek report said that and the spokesperson said he was only on once. And Whitney was like, wait a minute. I'm more concerned that he told me he was on it twice, but now the reports are he's only on it once. What is going on there? So he actually clarified in a Twitter space. Listen to this.
I want to take this opportunity to correct a tweet that we put up yesterday. We were called, Stephanie was called and asked, and I'm on the road, so I'm speaking to her remotely, and a lot of times I'll talk to her and then she'll put up a tweet. We were asked about a 1993 entry from Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs that showed me on his plane, me and my wife, Mary, and 2 of my kids. Mary was actually pregnant at that time with Connor, my 3rd child. That happened over Easter in 1993. And I answered her that my wife, Mary, had known Ghislaine Maxwell a little bit, and had and Ghislaine found out this was, Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. He found out that we were going to go to Palm Beach to visit my mother who lived there over the Easter holiday, and she offered us a ride. So I rode on that. I went on that flight. Of course, this is a time when nobody knew anything about Epstein and his shenanigans. I don't know if they even begun. This was 30 years ago. I don't even know if he'd begun all of his saga at that point. I'm sure he was involved in something bad. But there was actually there's another episode. It's the way that the tweet went, that Stephanie wrote the tweet. That was the only time I was on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. But actually, there was another time around the same time. I think it was a couple of months later. I went again with my wife, Mary, and my two older kids on his plane to Deadwood, South Dakota, to spend the day fossil hunting, to take the kids to Mount Rushmore and to Sitting Bull Memorial, and then go fossil hunting for a day. So we rode out there with them and again rode back, and that was the only time that I'd been on that plane. And of course, I never knew anything about what Jeffrey Epstein never. These things the same as everybody else did by reading them in the newspapers. Incidentally, lived in New York at that time and who were operating at a level where, like where I was, raising money for charities, for the waterkeepers and for Hudson River Keeper. I ran into a lot of people whose lives have since turned out to have a lot of very, very bad and disturbing secrets. I knew O.J. Simpson very well. I knew Bill Cosby very, very well. I knew Harvey Weinstein. I knew Roger Ailes, and many, many others. So, but you run into people in New York, and you have no idea, no way of knowing until it's revealed in the newspapers of Jeffrey Epstein with Whitney Webb, with an investigative reporter who was doing a story on him. So that's it. I just wanted to get that on the table, and then let's open it up for questions.
Okay, so he says there, I went on it twice. I just want to clarify that. Didn't know anything about Epstein and his shenanigans at the time. I've been friends with Bill Cosby, O.J. Simpson, Roger Ailes, right? He goes on and names. There's a lot of people who I know and have been friends with who've had, later on bad things, terrible things came out about them. Now, look, so he went twice in 1993. I'm going to say that people who we see a lot of people connected to Epstein. Maybe there's photographs of them at a party together, or people that maybe did take the jet, or the people that maybe visited his house for meetings and whatnot, because he didn't really have an office space. He conducted most of his meetings at his house. I think that for the most part, people connected to Epstein are not automatically guilty. Just because we see a photograph or we see a meeting or them appearing on the plane, it doesn't mean that they're automatically guilty. However, I get suspicious when the person has a connection to Epstein and they have an unwavering, inexplicable support for Israel. They just seem to be waving the Israeli flag quite a bit, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it, and they have a connection to Epstein. That, to me, then merits more scrutiny and more questioning, because many people believe that Epstein was, that the blackmail operation that Epstein was engaged in was a Mossad honey trap, that's what it was, and there's a lot of evidence to point towards that. So, and as we know, RFK Jr. has, like most politicians, shown unwavering support for Israel, even though it doesn't really align much with his messaging. His messaging has been very anti-war, and we shouldn't be getting engaging in all of this. Yet when it comes to Israel, he's been extremely, extremely supportive. A little uncomfortably so. I feel like there was a period of time where there were more photographs of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with the Israeli flag than with the American flag, and that was pretty suspect when he was doing a lot of the parades and marching and doing meetings with Rabbi Shmuley. And here is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Again, he's been saying we have to stand with Israel. We have to stand with Israel. He's been making excuses for their indiscriminate bombing, for the killing of children, even though he's children's health defense. He's been defending children and their health throughout his career. And yet now children are being killed indiscriminately in Israel. And he's saying, well, he's kind of shrugging his shoulders on it and making excuses for Israel, really touting the narrative line. And so that's really eyebrow raising. And then when you find out that he's been on Epstein's jet twice, it's eyebrow raising. Here's one of his tweets. I just want to point this out. This is the latest. He actually tweeted out, "Bravo, Bill Aikman. It's time to hold college administrations responsible for the epidemic of campus anti-Semitism by insisting on zero tolerance policies." So he's now insisting on zero tolerance policies. That's censorship that Aikman is calling for. He actually wrote a letter to the president of Harvard demanding a task force be created to identify students using slogans interpreted by some as being genocidal. And those are just interpretations. People are not calling outright for genocide, but people are saying, well, if you're waving the Palestinian flag, then you're for genocide. So he's wanting to identify students using slogans interpreted by some as being genocidal and to ensure that they face disciplinary action. He calls for a permanent mark placed on their records, preventing them from being hired by employers. He wants their Slack messages monitored for anti-Semitic statements and imagery, like, again, the Palestinian flag, and he wants students to turn each other in. And this is a tweet that he wrote out, a very long tweet, his letter to Harvard. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says, bravo, bravo, more censorship to combat anti-Semitism. And we want Big Brother monitoring and a task force and these kids' lives to be completely ruined. So, he's got this unwavering, inexplicable support for Israel. We don't understand it. We don't really get it, but we know that he was on it. But again, there's a lot. I mean, look, I don't think that most of the politicians, like all of the politicians in the government, most of them support Israel. Do I think that there is some sort of Mossad blackmail on all of them? No, I don't think there's Mossad blackmail on all of them, but maybe quite a few, or their family members. And then there's other pressure that's put on by the Israel lobby. There's plenty of money, and there's a lot of threats to primary a person or to take their campaign down or to just trash them endlessly. And that is something that a lot of politicians don't want to deal with. So there's a lot of reasons why a politician would support Israel, unwavering support, give them all of it, anything they ask for. And that's what Robert F. Kennedy calls for is anything they want. But again, eyebrows are raised if you have a connection to Epstein, especially since Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at that time in particular in 1993 had a pretty sordid past. He was not the most upstanding character sexually. He admits to being addicted to sex. He called it his lust demons when he was married to Mary Richardson, who he was on the plane with. He had cheated on her numerous times. There was actually a diary that came out. The New York Post put this out, RFK's sex diary, his secret journal of affairs. This diary was found by his ex-wife that you see there in the photograph. He says that in this diary, he talks about grappling with his lust demons, but he also kept a scorecard of more than 24 conquests while he was married. He had codes for the women showing sex acts, 10 meaning intercourse. 1 through 10 is kind of depending on what sex act they did together. There were apparently in this diary 37 women named, 16 got 10s, so he slept with 16 of these women. Apparently, in the journal on November 13th of 2001, RFK Jr. records a triple play, three separate encounters, codes 10. So he had sex with one of them, 3 and a 2, whatever those are. And they occurred on the same day that he attended a black tie fundraiser at the Waldorf Astoria for Christopher Reeve's charity, where he sat next to the paralyzed Superman star and magician David Blaine and comic Richard Belzer, according to this. So, he was known for being addicted to drugs, for having a sex addiction, for not being the most upstanding person, and this was his second wife. So, there's questions there. There's questions there. Was there a honey trap plan? And that's a question I think that's fair for anybody to ask. So especially if you're going to give unwavering support. Now let's go into why many people believe that Epstein was a Mossad honey trap blackmail operation. We know that he was intelligence. U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, when he was actually given his first deal, when they caught him and convicted him the first time, he was given a sweetheart deal, didn't really have to do, he got basically a slap on the wrist. And it was because U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta at the time said, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. What intelligence? Which intelligence? CIA, Mossad, both? Unclear, but he clearly belonged to intelligence because the U.S. attorney was told to leave him alone and give him a sweet deal. And he got that sweet deal. I want to show you this video. This is from RT, and this kind of goes over some of the connection between Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and Epstein. Let's go ahead and watch this.
You maintain that it was your employer, Robert Maxwell, owner of the Daily Mirror. You say that he was an Israeli agent, and as was his daughter.
He was not my employer. I would like to correct that.
Okay.
We worked together with him.
And you say that his daughter, Ghislaine, also, though, worked for Israel, and it was Robert Maxwell who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell way before the 1990s, as mainstream media is reporting.
Correct.
I suppose what the most alarming allegations that you've been making are that the entire Epstein operation was a honey trap operation to entrap politicians, policymakers, celebrities, people in the media eye, basically to become Israel's assets.
Correct. That it became basically an intelligence operation to entrap different politicians.
So that's an ex-Israeli spy claiming that Epstein was blackmailed or that he was blackmailing people in a honey trap, and that Robert Maxwell was part of it. Now, Robert Maxwell was given a hero's funeral by Israel. So this is one thing that points to Robert Maxwell actually being a Mossad asset himself. When he died, he was honored by the country. Many Mossad agents showed up to his funeral, and the prime minister of Israel at the time gave his eulogy. So he was given a hero's farewell as if he had done a lot for the country. And in fact, the prime minister who eulogized him said that he had done more for Israel than anybody would ever know. So perhaps that is pointing towards a Mossad honey trap operation, that Epstein was involved in that. Then and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Robert Maxwell's favorite child and his biggest confidant, and that the dots connect there. And then Epstein reportedly commits suicide, and all the things line up for him to be able to do that, with the cameras and the guards and the fact that he had the right equipment at the time in order to even commit suicide. And on top of it, what gets even more suspicious is that the modeling agent who was thought to supply many of the girls for these wealthy people in order to blackmail them also suicided himself in jail before he could be brought up into court. And Ghislaine Maxwell, who is more, is quiet and able to keep things quiet, apparently, maybe they knew, maybe she doesn't need to be suicided because she's not going to talk. I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. But conspiracy theories could be conspiracy truths, and especially when the dots connect and things certainly aren't adding up, and we're not getting the list of Epstein's clients, and we're getting very limited information. And there's perhaps a honey trap operation that is working for the very purpose of this time in Israel's history. if Mossad was blackmailing politicians or their family members, targeting their children, getting them in compromising situations, or targeting the politicians themselves or people in power, it is for this very moment. It is to gain unwavering support for Israel, to turn a blind eye to the things that they're doing, even though we're all witnessing with our own eyes the atrocities. Our politicians act like, it's okay, it's fine, it's no big deal, this is okay. Everybody just support Israel. And that makes us wonder, why in the world would they just give such unwavering support without saying, hey, maybe what you're doing is actually really wrong. Maybe we don't want to support this. Maybe we don't want to give you $14 billion for this operation. Maybe we don't want to help you push all of these people into Egypt. None of those questions are really happening. So there's a lot of eyebrows being raised, and a lot of questions, and a lot of wondering about these lists and the powerful people that are on these lists, and the possibility that maybe there was something collected on them that is ensuring that they all stand with Israel no matter what, at all costs. Don't even question it. And it's a good thing to wonder. I want to play this last clip. This is when I interviewed Alan Dershowitz. He says he's never going to be on the show again because he felt bombarded when I asked him about Epstein, even though we said in advance we would be asking questions about Epstein. But I want to play this clip for you because I'm asking him specifically about Mossad and this potentially being a Mossad operation. And this is what he had to say about Jeffrey Epstein. Well, many of us suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset to Mossad, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was in fact an agent of Mossad. There's a lot
Totally
of evidence
nonsense.
that point to this direction, and that
No,
they
there's no
were
evidence.
operating a blackmail operation in order to get very powerful people, including people like yourself, in precarious positions to where you could potentially work on behalf of the state of Israel or protect the
Well,
state of Israel.
I've been working on the state of Israel. I've been working for the state of Israel since before you were born. Jeffrey Epstein once visited me in Israel. He had never been there. He didn't know anybody in Israel. He didn't work for the Mossad. The Mossad wouldn't hire him. And I hope he had videotapes of everybody, because they would show I never did anything improper.
And maybe Alan Dershowitz never did. He did write a book, The Case for Israel. So Alan Dershowitz is a big, huge proponent for Israel. And he says he'd been working for Israel for longer than I was born. So perhaps Alan Dershowitz is also working, maybe there is more conspiracy there that are not theories, but truths. It's unclear. But I do know that Alan Dershowitz has been very much defending, if you look back at his defense of who he's defended, there was after 9/11, the dancing, the men that were caught on camera dancing. It looked like they were dancing. They were Israeli citizens. And Alan Dershowitz was one who I believe went in and helped clear that up and get those men out of the country and back to Israel. And again, he's written a book on it. And so The Case for Israel. So there's, I think it's important for us to ask questions. I think it's important for us to, as I asked Alan Dershowitz, for us to be asking other people in positions of power or people who are vying for positions of power these questions. I think it's fair. If somebody sat on an airplane with Epstein, I think it's completely fair to then question and scrutinize that and not necessarily take their word for it. No one's going to say, oh yeah, I'm totally involved and I hung out at Epstein's house and saw some girls and had some fun. And no one's going to admit that. So of course they're going to say it was innocent, it was nothing. And we, the people, have the opportunity to listen to what they say, and we get to decide if we believe them. And we look at all the evidence and we connect all the dots and we say, I don't know. I mean, so ask questions, scrutinize. But right now, we are seeing a lot of support for Israel, a lot of unwavering support, and a lot of it seems to be very questionable, or it's how can these people actually turn a blind eye or believe the things that they're actually saying? It doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it's probably because it doesn't make sense. And something else makes sense if you dig a little bit deeper.